Probably one of the toughest classes I ever had to take in my life was American Studies in my junior year of high school. It was a combined history and English course that was co-taught by my teachers Miss Williams and Mr. Bowles. The class was very reading and writing intensive and pushed me to my furthest degree. I remember spending all-nighters trying to read chapters for the next day or writing assignments up until the very last minute. Even after going through 4 years of college, that is still by far the most intense course I've ever taken. It's not like the material was all that hard to cover, it was more the capacity of the work that we were expected to uphold. But one thing's for sure, it taught me how to work under pressure, meet deadlines, and push myself to new lengths. I already had a strong work ethic, but it taught me how much I could accomplish. One of the biggest takeaways from this class was that we were to do a documentary project. We were to conduct interviews with experts in our topic, film them, and then create a 15 to 20 minute documentary filled with background music, B-roll footage and photographs, proper citing, and credits. My group did our project on Walter Cronkite, the famed reporter. We reached out to journalism and communications professors from nearby colleges to conduct our interviews with, and they were all great to work with. When it came time to edit this documentary, it came down upon me to edit the majority of the material. We had previously decided that would be my main task because I already had some experience in audio and video editing. However, I had never tried to tackle anything this ambitious by this point. We were instructed to use iMovie to create our documentaries, and we were instructed to use the computers in the Mac lab of the school. We would reserve time during and after school to come in and edit. I remember spending hours upon hours after school asking my parents to bring me meals as I stayed until the school would be locked up. Looking back at it, if I were to edit something like that nowadays, it would probably only take me a couple days to put together. But back then, it took me weeks to accomplish. It was my first time really putting anything together like this. After much blood, sweat, and tears, we finally finished all of our documentaries and presented them at a local theater. My teachers and fellow classmates were all impressed by the work that I had put in, saying that I had a natural eye for filmmaking and telling stories. I was very proud of the achievement, but I also felt it was the biggest pain in my behind. Little did I know that the documentary project would be the foundation of the early days of Walsh Wednesday and many more projects to come. When I attended the College of St. Rose for music industry, we focused primarily on audio engineering, and I never had any classes on film or video production. That was primarily reserved for the communications majors. By the time I started the Walsh Wednesday concert series, I was diving into a far greater amount of production and editing than simply clicking record on my phone like I used to. I was recording audio through my soundboard while filming multiple takes and angles. And since I was just a one-man team, it was up to me to edit this all together. If it wasn't for American Studies, I wouldn't have had the background to create the Walsh Wednesday concert series. I brushed up on my iMovie skills, and I also taught myself how to use Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro. My friend Marvin eventually helped me with editing for some of the episodes and taught me much about how I could do it myself. Over the years, I've continued to push my abilities by directing, filming, editing, and producing several of my own music videos and assisting on a great number of video projects. What I'm trying to say is you never know what one experience in your past may lead to. You may believe that certain things happen for a reason. Well, whether you do or not, I think it's easy to agree that certain things happen for a reason because things you have set up in your past have helped pave the way to influence your future. In my case, if it weren't for a class that stressed me out beyond belief for 1 year in high school, I doubt I would be providing the content that I am. I may not be presenting this podcast. Every little bit of experience is just another loop on your tool belt as you go to build the life you desire. I love content creating, and if it weren't for the path that I took, I wouldn't be doing many of the things that I love today. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Walsh Wednesday, the Reflective Series. As always, I'm Connor Walsh, and today I'll be sitting down with two content creators that happen to be really close friends of mine. We'll be talking to them about how they got started, some of their fondest projects, how COVID has influenced their content and creativity, and what we have to look forward from them. When we return from the break, we will start with my good friend Nick Rivera, followed by my discussion with my former co-worker and dear old friend, Brendan Lynch. Besides Walsh Wednesday, I have another series that I produce, presented by the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York, in affiliation with Student Development, Student Association, and the college marketing team. St. Rose Rocks is a web series that highlights music for the Golden Knights by the Golden Knights. Back for a limited run, St. Rose Rocks showcases talent from the St. Rose community, whether it be current students or alumni. Very similar to Walsh Wednesday, I sit down with the artists as we listen to two of their songs, talk about the backstories behind said songs, and dive into their inspirations and aspirations. For more on that, you can follow St. Rose Rocks on the College of St. Rose Student Association Facebook page or the St. Rose Rocks YouTube channel. Welcome back, everybody. The other day, I had the chance to sit down with a good friend of mine and former roommate, Nick Rivera. Now, Nick has always been a lover for video games, the creative arts, and media. However, in 2020, he really took it upon himself to take that love to a whole new level. What started out as just some video game streaming has kind of turned into something really big for him.
My name is Nick. I go by Weedy Gonzo over on YouTube and Twitch. I'm a content creator. My big thing is I want to play games and I want to release content that people can relate to and just, chill back. So the way I got into this, right? I've been so interested in playing a game and share my experience, right? So back in the day, I want to say middle school, high school times, right? I used to watch a lot of content creators from the Pokemon community because Pokemon was one of my first games that I've played as a kid, right? And I feel like we've all played it a little bit. I was very interested, not with the story aspect, but just the competitive aspect of it. Because for those who don't know, when you get into Pokemon, right, it's a whole big competitive thing, right? There's effort value points that you can get in to make your Mon the strongest, and then just battle it out with your friends and all that. That was always fun. So I started watching a lot of content creators in that community, right? I said, you know what? I have a lot of friends that also play Pokemon. What if I want to start doing content like that, right? And then just having a community behind me that will support me in doing that. That was the biggest reason on why I really got started the way I did. I attempted to do recordings and podcasts way back in the day, but I said, you know what? I've been wanting to do this for almost 7 years now. Let me just get into it. During this whole pandemic thing, right? And I downloaded OBS. I downloaded my editing software on my old computer, which is a really old Dell Inspiron, right? It's one of the 5th gen processor Inspirons. And I figured, you know what? I'll do some basic stuff on here. I'll record myself playing through Pokemon Emerald and all that fun stuff and share my experiences with that. It was a hell of a lot of fun. It really was. And that's just the biggest reason for me to start all of this content creation was be able to have that community behind me that'll support each other through everything.
It's really exhilarating to see how community-driven the whole video game community can be. So I talked to Nick a little bit more about the video game streaming that he does, and we talked about one of his biggest passions, Pokemon.
I'm in a couple Pokemon draft leagues right now, but the one I'm mainly recording for the channel is the Global Serene Cup, the GSC. It's in its inaugural season, right? So I'm very honored to be a part of that league, right? And I am the head coach, right, of the New York Metangs, right? So the Mets are my favorite team, right? And Metang had MET in the front. So you know what? Let me mash those two together and make a logo out of it. And shout out to my guy Pokemaster Mike for the logo. It's amazing. We have merch now. Cop yourself some merch. Yeah, it's been a fun time recording that this season. I just put out I put out week 4 of that league so far, and we're doing okay so far. We're doing okay.
One thing that gaming has proven is that it can break barriers and connect us with people from all over the world. So I asked Nick about the widespread community that this has.
We have a lot of coaches that are EU, specifically in my league, in Europe. There's a couple in Asia, there's a couple in Australia, and there's only 3 of us in North America. So being able to have that global outreach around something that, we all have a passion in, we all love, that, it's been fantastic, man. It really has been.
Besides the video game streaming, Nick is also a passionate musician. Actually, we had the chance to collaborate, co-write, and record a song together on my upcoming album, Away From Home. It all started from us just jamming out one afternoon in my bedroom, and I played this one riff, and that was enough to get us soaring for the rest of the afternoon as we composed the song together.
It was like, that's where the best songs come from, right? They just come from nothing and we just make it work. And I feel like that's what Long Way Home was for us. This one, where we just came up with it on the spot. We were just like dicking around and all that. It was amazing to see how you put it all together. So, kudos to you, man. Kudos to you.
Well, hey, it took a lot of collaboration on that song. The only reason why it sounds as good as it does is because all the people involved, including yourself, big time. And I still have, remember we recorded it? We were like, we got something good here. We don't want to forget it. So, we recorded, us just figuring things out for an hour. Nah, it's funny to listen to sometimes, how excited we would get over certain aspects of the song.
Yeah, man. That's where, that's my favorite part of the the creation process is, just having that aha or eureka moment and just rolling with it. And that's what we did on Long Way Home.
Besides our collaboration, Nick has some great music of his own out there, and he actually just released an album.
I just released my first full-length album, right? It's called Forgive Me While I Repent. It's been 4 years in the making, right? It's been 4 years. I've been working on this since freshman year of college. Working on all the material and all that. And I feel like it came together so well and so perfectly. If y'all ever heard of lo-fi, that chill, kind of heavy bass, kind of not, a lot of synth in there, a lot of effects. That's how I would classify my own music. It's a lo-fi with a hip-hop mix. You can hear basic blast beats or basic drill beats all into a lo-fi album. And I think it came out pretty well.
Fortunate enough for us, Nick provided Walsh Wednesday with one of his songs to showcase on this episode called Asking for Forgiveness.
That's one of my most recent tracks that I've made. I said, I kind of want to make another soft song, but mainly focus on acoustic guitar. So I said, you know what? I'll MIDI this acoustic guitar right now with some basic chords, add a little bit of a flanger to it to make it sound kind of wavy, right? And let me put some flute on it because we love flute. I'm making these descriptions so basic, but I'm telling you, it's very worth it to go check out. It's an experience and a half just listening to this whole album track by track.
Before we get into the song, let Nick tell you where you can find all of his various content.
Hey, I can do that for you. So you can find me on YouTube, on youtube.com/c/WeedyGonzo. You can catch me over on Twitch, where I do a lot of live streams and audience interaction. You can find that on twitch.tv/TheWeedyGonzo. And follow me on Instagram and Twitter at TheWeedyGonzo for the most latest news.
I highly recommend checking out everything that Nick Rivera, aka Weedy Gonzo, has available. You can check out the links in the description in order to follow him, listen to his music, and check out more. Forgive Me While I Repent is out right now. You can listen to that on YouTube, and you can hear our collaboration of Long Way Home on my album Away From Home, November 27th. You can also listen to more of Nick and I's interview at patreon.com/Connor Walsh, where he dives into a few more of the songs on the album. I highly recommend. It's a great listen. Speaking about great listens, let's listen to his track, Asking for Forgiveness. content creation can be such a fulfilling career. However, it can be difficult to make it sustainable in the beginning as you try to build your following and branch out into the market. Creators have to be creative in order to catch the attention of new fans and find unique ways to market themselves. And it's not always cheap to fund all the projects. Creators have turned to new platforms to support themselves, one of them being Patreon. Patreon allows creators to build a more sustainable income source while fans get access to the community, exclusive content, and the pride of fueling work they love. I have my own Patreon page, and if you wish to support Walsh Wednesday, my music, and my other creative endeavors, I'd appreciate subscribing to my page. There you can find complete interviews conducted with each of my guests. For instance, if by the end of this episode you haven't gotten enough of Nick and Brendan, then you can hop on over to my page to listen to our entire interviews. Besides that, my album Away From Home will be out in just a couple weeks, releasing on November 27th. I'll be uploading content shortly, going behind the stories of the songs, and possibly performing some stripped-down renditions. The lowest tier of patronage starts at $3. You can check out more at patreon.com/Connor Walsh. Welcome back, everybody. My next guest on Walsh Wednesday is my good friend, Brendan Lynch. Now, Brendan is a filmmaker and content creator, but when I first met him, he was a camp counselor back at Gold's Gym summer camp where we both used to work. I asked him how much he reflects upon those memories of that time period.
I think about them all the time. I think about them all the time. Especially the one moment I think I'll have forever is when we did the lip syncing battle for the camp. And that was honestly, I think, the most amazing moment that I've had there. That is definitely my favorite moment from working there.
What was it? That was you did Uptown Funk and I did Shut Up and Dance with Me, right? And I gave you one of my wigs too to wear. You looked
phenomenal.
Oh my
gosh. I have that picture somewhere. I have that picture of us somewhere.
Oh my God, the pictures. I probably have the pictures somewhere as well.
And there's a video. I think there's a video.
There is a video. I have the video saved. If I can find it in time, I'm going to have to put it in the description of this podcast.
Put it in the description and send it to me. I want to watch that.
Besides these lip sync battles, we did a lot of creative things back then with all the different camps that we worked. So I asked him if and how this time period has affected his creativity today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of the camps that I actually was head counselor of was movie making camp. I've been always into filmmaking and just making little videos. I can remember the first time when I actually attended movie making camp at, I think it was Casper Kill before it moved over to Gold's Gym, putting silly videos, you know how they are, just silly videos together, making a script, making a little story, and just it's really the storytelling that comes with it. That was my foundation, really. I was able to work with kids and help them work out the creative process of storytelling, and even myself experiment with teaching people film and seeing how kids tell stories visually and also in general. And it's definitely have kept me in the path of going with content creating and video production. I mean, I was doing that even before I knew that I wanted to be into film. And I've been making little short YouTube videos since I probably was, 13 with my friends. I had an old camcorder that I just would film us doing silly stuff, running around, little sketches. It was always little sketches. I always liked doing little comedy sketch stuff and putting it together into a show. That's what I did. I feel like I always had a knack for creating content like that.
Though Brendan's always had this passion, when he originally went to college at Fredonia, he originally went for something completely different.
Well, what actually brought me to Fredonia was I started going to school for biochemistry. I wanted to be a forensic scientist. Yeah, which is crazy because I did a whole 360 and ended up going down the creative route instead of the scientific one. And they had recently built a new science building. They had really good science program there. And it was in the SUNY system. So, it was kind of perfect. But yeah, that's what happened. And I realized, once I was doing science and all that stuff, I was missing something, I was always creative. And the main pull for science was, you're always told art doesn't make you as much money or as money as quick. So that's what kind of drew me to science. But then I realized how unhappy I was doing that I switched over and realized, film making was what I wanted to do. So I actually switched over to liberal arts just to get my credits out of the way. And then my roommate actually was a comm major and he was telling me all these projects. He would come home to our dorm at all the stuff that he learned in class. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I used to know video stuff when I was a kid. He's like, yeah, you should really try it. And he actually invited me he was actually doing TV capstone where they actually had to do film. It was a little TV production, so it was a little different than what I actually ended up doing. But, they had a script made. I was an actor on it, and it just really brought me back to my roots. And I really, really missed that. And I realized then that my real true path is being creative through video production.
That one role was the spark to get everything else going for the rest of his college career. After that show, he moved on to work and produce a number of other shows in college.
What that was like a class exercise where someone writes basically a little either sketch or just basically just a little segment. It could be like a talk show. A lot of time it was like some sort of comedic thing, just because, comedy is like fun to write. So when I was doing that class, I was like, oh, this is really nice. And the first thing I did when I switched over to communication was actually join the television station where I worked on my first show, Kenspiracy, which my two good friends, Will Saddleberg and Ken Dowd, created. Season 1, I was I was there every day helping them. I was actually I was an actor on that. I was playing myself, but, a character of myself. And it was kind of like a comedy talk show. They would have a little news segment similar to like The Onion or something. And they'd, do fake news stories. And we would have, my job was to write some sort of comedy sketch that would play in between them talking about different news segments. They were the first people to give me complete creative control on something like that. They actually ended up making me a producer for season 2. And the three of us probably made the best season of a show that I've ever worked on. Unfortunately, it was only 2 seasons because they graduated the following year. And that's really what prompted me to actually create my own show, Fredtown USA, which was like my baby in college. I did that for about, I think it's 2 or 3 years. I would have to look back. I think it was my junior and senior year were the big time was the most time I was doing it. And honestly, that was great. I was able to get 4 seasons in of that under my belt while I was there. And I produced the first season by myself. It was a very small crew. It was really just my friends that I could get on the weekends, and we would just film some stuff. And then I had my good friend Haley Poth. I asked her season 2 to be my co-producer and help me kind of like get things together. Because, the one thing I realized when creating that show is that there's only so much one person can do. And you need definitely a team that you can trust. And she was there for season 2 of Kenspiracy. And from there, she was always committed. Like I kind of saw myself in her when she was on Kenspiracy and was like, she's someone committed to this. And, we both continued to make one of the best shows that I've worked on so far. And I honestly look back to it still as some of my favorite moments in life. After, of course, our Lip Sync Battle hiccups. Yeah, but even going back to that, it was a comedy sketch show, and that was something that I always liked doing. And it was finally something that I saw people at campus like. We would post it to YouTube. We had our own YouTube channel. People were liking it. People would recognize us because a lot of the things we were heavily influenced by. Like I was heavily influenced by like Tim and Eric Andre's show, that kind of like Adult Swim kind of humor where it was just odd stuff happening in public and kind of like, not social experiments, but more of social reactions. I mean, we were dabbling a little bit with it in Kenspiracy, but Will and Ken, they didn't want to go too far. I always had these crazy ideas that was like, not almost get us in trouble, but like there was a few, we did come during the shooting of Kenspiracy, one of the episodes. I actually had a toll booth in front of one of the buildings on campus, and I was charging people 2 cents to come in. It was crazy. Unfortunately, we didn't get the audio for it, so it never ended up being an episode. But there's footage somewhere. UP actually came up and kind of told us we had to stop. So that was like the farthest that we've ever pushed the envelope. And since then, we were kind of cautious. But when I did Fredtown, the one thing was I want to push the envelope as much as we can. And we did. We did some crazy stuff. Each year, the crew got bigger. I mean, even from just season 1 to season 2, I mean, I had more friends involved. And a lot of my friends I made through Fredtown, and like they're still my best friends to this day. That's when I knew like my passion is that kind of content creation with friends and other creative minds. And honestly, that's what kind of got me through school. That was like my biggest thing. And that was like my baby, like I said before. It was honestly the best thing I ever did. Yeah, I mean, as much as I created the show, it was my idea, it wouldn't have happened without Haley or any of my other friends. I mean, she even continued the show after me. It was awesome. It was just crazy to see how she interpreted the show.
As college was coming to a close, Brendan and a few of his friends realized that they still had a lot of creative ideas that they wanted to flesh out. So they came together to work on a number of projects, which eventually turned into a very interesting business venture for them.
Near the end of my senior year, my friends Peter Meziars and Desi, we actually started doing short films. We realized it was the end of the year and like we wouldn't have access to the equipment we would have once we're out of school. So we made it our goal to make as many little short films as we could, 5-minute pieces, just to have, and just because whenever there was a time that we weren't working on a project versus class, we were renting out the equipment. We actually Peter was my roommate my senior year, and Desi actually lived below me in the same house. And we actually, we saw each other a lot. Desi was half the time was on my couch, either asleep or watching a movie with Peter. We just were like, okay, we got this amount of time left. Let's crank out as much. And I think in like a month or two, near end of the year, we cranked out 3 short films. One that is completely done and the other 2 kind of stuck in post. We were just like, we got to shoot as much as we can, because regardless if we get it done editing wise or anything, we have the footage and we can always edit, down the line. That's what we kind of where we're at now. That kind of actually formed our little production company, Production House 45, after living on 45 Canada Way in school. Actually, since then, we've been, still making short films and building that brand kind of, nothing officially yet, it's a lot of short film stuff, but we do eventually, plan on making that our business and making it big. I mean, so we finished one of our short films, The Hall. I think it was beginning of 2020. We actually finished that. That was one that we shot our senior year of school. So like 2 years later, we finally, we finally get this done. And to see that fully strung out and finished, it was amazing. Our skills have grown so much. I mean, I remember watching a rough cut of it closer to our senior year. We had a rough cut of it. And Desi actually he's a colorist. He does all of our color grading and color correction on the videos. Just from there, just seeing how much he has improved since then is crazy. I mean, it made the film so much better. We recently just shot a little, we've been trying to do contests and stuff just to keep us busy. And we actually have been entering, before COVID, we had, like a 1-minute horror, other little stuff. And recently, very small closed set at their apartment. It was just them. I wasn't there, unfortunately. They're based out of the city. So they actually shot a 4-minute short piece for a contest by Film Riot on YouTube. They were doing a proof of concept. So we had this proof of concept. We actually had, Desi had written in our senior year of school. We actually did the 1-minute horror was called Transmute. And from that kind of spawned this proof of concept called Grasping at Smoke, which is our latest piece that we're working on. We had the 4-minute piece that was for the contest. And unfortunately it didn't win anything because it had to be 4 minutes. We had to cut a lot of the content out. So we're actually we were like, well, I mean, that didn't do well in that contest, but let's, make the full no restriction. It's about, I think, 6 or 7 minutes now, and like entering some festivals and stuff. That's kind of been my personal stuff with them. We've been trying to get that done and just kind of growing our brand. I mean, that's really what it is. Filmmaking is just, making what you want and kind of making it happen on your own. If you want it to happen, you got to make it happen. And it's just like, okay, that didn't work out, but you can't let that bog you down. You got to keep pushing. A lot of our earlier stuff, was when we were first learning. And we've grown so much from there, and not everything's going to be a home run. They're building blocks, and that's, I could say to any indie filmmaker, don't let one project discourage you from continuing your passion. You'll eventually get through it. It's going to take time and practice and effort. You got to start somewhere. You can't be an award-winning director tomorrow. It takes time. I mean, yeah, that from making music. I mean, it's not too much different. It's just a different medium. You're not going to get big unless people know who you are. And the only way for people to know who you are is if you get your name out there. The only way to get your name out there is if you keep making stuff, And if you stop, that's the end of that. One of my professors in school always told me, always film. Bring your camera with you and just roll.
Besides building up Production House 45, Brendan's also gained a lot of experience from working with notable film companies out there.
I've actually worked on some professional sets ranging from indie to full budget films and television shows, such as Netflix and HBO stuff, which is crazy. I never thought that I'd be working on that kind of, I never thought I'd set foot on a HBO or Netflix set. And it's crazy. I've done that, in the time that I've been out of school. It took me a while to get into it. I didn't just, graduate and say, hey, here's your job, like most other majors or other people getting jobs. It took some time. I had a part-time job for a while, and I basically just kept applying for editing assistant, anything that I could, because, at this time, in school, I was editing, shooting, like I could do a lot of stuff. So I had a television background. I had an internship internship doing news media kind of stuff, doing little short videos. So, I was shooting my resume everywhere. And I actually had a family friend who was a producer. They were shooting a Starbucks commercial in the city, and they're like, hey, we need a PA. Are you available? And I was like, yeah. That day I just went down to the city, showed up on set, and kind of started my career there. It was that one day where I was a production assistant doing, the grunt work of all sets have. It was one day, but that was like my foot in the door kind of deal. The big thing with film production is really making those connections. The more connections you have, the more likely you're to get work. So that was my first professional job, but I didn't see a film set for a while, a few months, almost a year, before I actually ran into the art department of Food That Built America for the History Channel. They had a post on Facebook page, I believe, about looking for some people, which is kind of how you get a lot of the jobs. There's like, especially for production assistants, there's usually like forums or like Facebook pages of people just posting, hey, we need this or this. If you're available, send us your resume. Here's the rate. So I shot my resume and I actually heard back from them and found myself up in Hudson, New York, basically as an art PA, setting up this factory for a scene for the Food That Built America, which was a show on the History Channel that kind of told the story of the food that built America, such as Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, Wendy's, all that kind of stuff, and Hershey's chocolate. We were actually making the Hershey factory and the Post factory. They were going to be in the same building, set wise. That's when I learned like what kind of goes into the sets. It's crazy to think that the work that goes into visually take people places in films, and it's actually some fake walls and just some paint. We turned an old warehouse into a factory and it was crazy. I was there for like a week, and then they liked my work ethic. I was there every day. I did my work, didn't complain. The prop master actually needed a props assistant. They called me back to go work the props department. So I was actually working under Thor Foss, the prop master, on that as his props PA, where I helped get things together. Did a lot of paperwork stuff, a little more fun stuff, not just standing around. Like, not that most PA work is standing around, but with that, this one was a little props production assistant was a little more creative. I helped, glue on labels, which you wouldn't really find yourself doing on. This was a non-union thing, so there was a lot of stuff that they were letting me do that I wouldn't be able to do in a union job. So that's the pros and cons of working on union and non-union. It was awesome. That's kind of like what things started to pick up. They loved my work on that so much that Thor was like, hey, I want to keep in touch. I'll call you next time there's a job. Went back to my part-time job, did that for like a few months, about like 6 months. And then I got a call actually from Thor. It was, hey, I'm working on this slasher film, Trick, that's shooting up in your area, directed by Patrick Lussier, and written by him and also Todd Farmer. And Todd Farmer is the guy who did Jason X, who wrote Jason X. And they also worked together on My Bloody Valentine. It was an indie film. It was my first movie really working on it. I worked on that for the next 2 months, and that was awesome. From there, that's when things really started picking up, and I wasn't, the gaps between jobs weren't as long. I got a job on the HBO miniseries, I Know As Much Is True. Oh, actually, hold on. Before I do that at the same time I actually got a day working on The Joker that was filming in Newark, New Jersey. And that was awesome. That was like kind of another thing. I had a neighbor that I was helping with yard work. She was in the film industry, and she was like, oh, hey, I had someone hit me up about this film shooting in. She said something about, oh, you want to work on The Joker? And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, not thinking that was real. And then I actually got a phone call from the key PA they're doing like, they had like a code name for it. They're like, oh, hey, I'm shooting a show called Romeo. Are you free? Are you able to work? It's in New Jersey. And I was like, yeah, sure, it's fine. And then he's like, all right, I want to send you over the call sheet, which is the sheet they send out to all the crew members, basically giving you the time crew call is, which is when you arrive, and basically all the information for all the scenes you're shooting for the day and like where everything is. And I started reading it, and I noticed it was like all these names. I was like, oh, that's like a big name. And I was like, I remember I was reading like the props, because I was just curious, working with Thor. I was like, oh, I wonder what the prop master is and stuff. So I was actually looking at the props breakdown for the scenes, and it said Joker makeup for this. And I was like, what? And I realized I like Googled code name for like the Joker, and it was Romeo. And I that day I found out that I showed up, and I realized I was working a night on The Joker, and it was awesome. It was the one scene, it was at the end of the movie where they're driving through the cities in a cop car, and there's like a riot breaking out, and like things are on fire. It was awesome. It was a 1 day thing. It was an overnight, which kind of stink. But it was, we started at 4 at night, or 4 in the afternoon, and then we wrapped at like 6 in the morning. So I drove home like 6 in the morning, all the way home, like 2.5 hours almost.
I think it's
remember
pretty
getting
worth
home
it.
and just like passing out. Oh, it was worth it. And that was crazy. And that was going on when I was actually working with Thor. But that was like my first big thing. But then HBO was my like second biggest thing, and the longest lasting job that I had. I mean, it was the first big full-time position I had as a production assistant. But what happened was, same kind of deal, same family friend or neighbor was like, hey, I actually got hit up for another job. She's not really working anymore. Would you want me to send your information? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And like, hey, we need a production assistant for, a week. They weren't promising like the whole shoot. They were like, oh, we need like what they call additional PAs, just kind of like extra bodies to help out, lock down the scene, make sure no one like walks in on set when that aren't a part of the crew, and just, eyes and stuff. Because we're basically like kind of glorified security guards almost. A little less qualification. So I ended up working on a week with that. And they basically, the way it goes, if you do a good job, they kind of keep you around. So they kept calling me back and got to a point where like, hey, we want you for the rest of the show. And I ended up working 7 months on that show. And it was the whole ride. I missed like the first few weeks of shooting, and I was there for the rest of it. And it was awesome. And just from there, I was kind of consistent work. Right after that, I worked on a Netflix job. While there were some days I wasn't working that, because as an additional, you're not like guaranteed all the time. It was basically, I was just lucky enough to get it. There was a few days, like a few weeks that I wasn't working, and I was actually working on another movie that was shooting independent film, Silent Retreat, which had a crazy cast. It had Isabella Rossellini, she was the woman from David Lynch's movie Blue Velvet. It had Dennis Haysbert from all those insurance or the Allstate commercials. Jack Whitehall, he's one of the main characters. He's a comedian from England.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his.
Sarah Goldenberg. Yeah, no, it was crazy working with them, and it was crazy. That was going on while I was also working on HBO. So most of 2019, I was working on set.
As long as I've known Brendan, he's been an extremely hard worker and a really incredible guy. He's a ball full of energy and just a positive light to have around you. So it's no surprise that he kept getting positions because, he's a likable guy.
Which is crazy because a lot of people, not that everyone's miserable on set, but just the hours we work 12-hour days ranging from 6 in the morning from, crazy stuff. There's not a lot of happy campers, Not everyone wants to be as jibbery and as happy as I am all the time, but that's just a personality trait that I had. And actually it was a kind of like a running joke on the HBO show that they're like, you're just too happy. And they're like, oh, don't worry, it'll break you. And I every job, I kind of went in the same attitude. I was just there to, get the job done. I had a very happy, outgoing attitude. As you know, that was actually something people, recognize and actually enjoyed having around, because they're just like, it's good. Like they enjoyed having me around just because of that energy. It's a breath of fresh air because it, as glorious as it sounds working on set, there's also some cons. You're away from your family and friends for a long time. I mean, you're working 5 days a week, 12-hour days, like 12 plus hours. It's not always 12 hours, but you're at least working 12 hours. And sometimes those 12-hour days turn to 16-hour days, and not a lot of sleep in between those days. So it definitely was a physical and mental toll on me. As much as fun as it was and as amazing as it was, I did miss out on a lot of things as well in my life.
When we return, we're going to talk about 2020 and what the pandemic has looked like for the film industry, along with Brendan as an individual. Earlier in this episode, we talked about finding your base, finding your market, finding your group as you continue to create content and strive towards becoming the best possible creator you can be. That's something that I strive to do here at Walsh Wednesday, and I also want to open this platform up to you guys. If you know somebody or you are somebody with an incredible story that needs to be told on this platform, well, hey, reach out. I would love to listen sometime, and I would love to try to get you onto an episode of Walsh Wednesday. Also, if you're a business owner or know of anybody who has a business, send them on over to us so they can promote with us. So if you're interested in any sponsorship opportunities, please reach out to me at connorwalshmusic.management@gmail.com. And I'd love to sit down and talk with you about some kind of sponsorship negotiation. Thank you very much. Every little bit of support is appreciated, and if I can support you guys back in return, well, that would be time well spent. It's a well-known fact that COVID-19 has impacted many businesses all around the globe, and the film industry is no exception by any means. So I asked Brendan what his experience was when COVID hit.
Well, I remember the last day that I was on set when COVID hit, actually. I was starting a new job in the city. It was the equalizer pilot. We worked about 2 days. I worked about 2 days as I was actually in the locations department this time as a unit PA. I was ready for it. I was actually working with one of my unit PA that worked on the HBO job, Jordan, and he was going to teach me. I mean, he knew everything that needed to be done, and I was so excited to be working with him. 2 days in, we get everything that we need to start our day. We're getting ready to the weekend's coming up, and then we're going to start shooting, and we go dark. They're like, hey guys, we're actually going to go home. We're going to take 2 weeks off because of COVID and see where it goes from there. And, I knew it wasn't going to be 2 weeks. I knew it was going to be a little bit longer, but I didn't think it was going to be as long as it was. So, people were very optimistic, but slowly you saw show by show. And like I had, we were working in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of sound stages that you work at, and there other projects are there. So you run into a lot of people you've worked with before. And like slowly my show went dark. My one friend's show went dark. And then all of a sudden, all of New York, all filming stopped and didn't come back for a while. I mean, we were one of the last phases in New York to come back. Even then, phase 4, we were still kind of delayed and just getting back. I mean, it's it's like impossible to do social distancing wise. I mean, there's so many things you had to do in close proximity that it's like, it seems impossible to even start. And during COVID, joined a lot of webinars and stuff, just talking about gearing up and what people are doing, the protocols that they are creating. I mean, no one knew what to do. No one. I mean, like a lot of people were looking to Hollywood and their producers there and seeing what their protocols were going to be. But a lot of people just, I was good friends with. Actually, there's a soundstage here in Newburgh, number of stages, and I know the owners, Tony and Summer, from working on some of the independent stuff here. And actually, HBO shot some stuff there. And they always called me when they needed an extra hand with something. They were holding Zoom conferences about what their plan was. Then they went out and reached out to other people, other producers and stuff, and kind of made their own game plan. And they were the 2 producers that I saw actually like coming up with a song and how to run their soundstage. I mean, it's kind of impossible to shoot anything with a small crew. So that came down to how lunch was going to be held. Because I mean, lunch is basically a free buffet. Everyone sits wherever they want. I mean, that changed. You can't sit next to people anymore. I mean, it took a toll. It took a while to figure out a safe way to come back to set. And I mean, I'm not saying it's safe now, but still, the dangers of COVID definitely hinder what you can do on set. I mean, not a lot of productions are back. I mean, there's a good amount, but definitely not to the capacity that they used to be. I personally don't feel comfortable going back yet. That's why I kind of, took a little break from production, doing some other stuff, some other passions I'm working on, working on some personal stuff. It's a different world. I mean, they had to create a whole new, basically, department for just COVID. There's weekly or bi-weekly testing. A lot of the food is like already put together for you. You kind of just pick it up and you have to, sit 6 feet apart. But basically what I'm seeing now is like all the actors, everyone's wearing a mask up until the point where they're rolling, and then the actors, take off their masks. And even they're kept away from the set now. At the point, normally, actors, they ate with you a lot of the time, they're part of the crew. Now it's like they kind of have to go in their own bubble and like go off and stay away from people just because they're the only ones who can really take their masks off and are putting themselves in danger just for acting. My main thing is, I hope coming out of it, producers and people going into making these protocols and kind of realizing, maybe the way things were going weren't the best way. Besides COVID, I mean, they were talking about, cutting the days. I mean, I know one of the big things that Summer and Tony were talking about when they were discussing things was like making shifts, having an A team and a B team come in just to cut down exposure of people on set. I mean, if you think about it, working 12-hour days, 12+ hour days, 5 days a week, that takes a toll on people. Some people drive home after that. It's a safety thing. It's not the safest things. I mean, for a while, I needed that break. It's a lot on somebody. It's, kind of the unspoken. Everyone is miserable on set because of it. You try to think maybe some positive stuff to come out of COVID is the rethinking of how sets run. Do we really need to be there for 12 hours? Can we do what we did with shifts? Like the big thing with that though is like, if the consistency of work, can you have 2 teams work together and make a consistent image? I mean, that was basically the big thing about working so like those hours, is consistency. And it's definitely opened a lot of avenues of how they can reform the whole film industry. Even as a production system, I mean, we're not a part of a union like a lot of the other people on set, so we're not covered by certain things. We don't get meal penalties, we don't get coverage and stuff. We're basically just like gig workers. And that's another big thing that is kind of another like unspoken thing they don't really talk about. I mean, it is an entry-level position, but we're doing a lot of the work too. So that was something that I really have been kind of advocating for since then, even with COVID, before COVID a little bit, COVID kind of just helped because everyone had a moment to just think about things, be like, hey, maybe we weren't doing the best things. With COVID, I mean, it definitely opened a lot of eyes, I hope, on how film sets should be run and how to go forward in the future with COVID. I mean, cases are rising, so I definitely don't think it's going to be gone anytime soon. Even with vaccines on the horizon, it's going to be like a weird world for a while, and I don't think we'll be able to see the same set that I worked on going in for a while. And I mean, you can even see it with movies. Like movie theaters aren't doing something. Even like not a lot of new movies are being made right now, and it's crazy. It's like a whole like cultural shock almost too. It's crazy. Yeah, and also we're not. I don't want to say we're not the most important thing. That's up to discussion. We're not essential workers, so it's just like it's hard because we're kind of the last thing that people really want to put energy into bringing back. I mean, and I also don't blame that. Like I also see that side. That's another thing. Like you said, it gave people time to like just step back and reassess things. I mean, my big thing that came out of COVID was reassess as a person and kind of actually coming to the idea is like, is this what I really want to do? Is working on set like this? And that's where I kind of started switching my gears back to my own personal projects. A lot of stuff that I can do on, like, not on my own, but to a smaller degree. I actually lost focus of that just because when I was working on sets, that was basically my life. Like I said, we were working 12 plus hours and I kind of like stopped being my creative self. As much as I was working on a movie, I wasn't really doing my own thing and I didn't have really time to, because in my free time, I was either sleeping or seeing people I haven't seen in like a while. I mean, I went months without seeing my family. I missed vacations. You can't just like call out, you don't get vacation time. It's not your typical job. You sign on for the 7 months, you're on for the 7 months. And if you say you can't do a week, that might be that might end up being the whole show, like somewhere replaces you and they actually might like them better. Not that you guys work differently, but they just might click with them better and your job's gone. It was a lot of uncertainty and the security wasn't really there. So that was something that was always stressing me out too. So like, I'm glad I had time to like sit back and, look at it from the outside. Something I've noticed also working on personal projects is comes to a point where you're almost like you're gone. You're just so exhausted. You don't even know what you're doing, and you get sloppy. And there's a point where productivity just stops because it's just you're so exhausted, and it definitely takes a toll because you end up shooting like you're shooting 6 hours of stuff you're gonna have to reshoot now. It's a waste of time almost.
And that's a big amount of perspective that you just don't get overnight. It takes a lot of time, a lot of commitment, and a lot of experience to be able to come up with the wisdom that you need to move forward. I was really grateful to have Brendan on this episode, and I asked him if he had any advice for any other content creator, what would it be?
Don't stop creating. Don't just be persistent. Set your mind to a goal and do everything you can to make that goal come true. I think I learned that making Fredtown. I had an idea for Fredtown for a while. I mean, as a kid, and I just kept doing it over and over again and putting my mind to it. And honestly, you even said it yourself, opportunities arise, take them. Always be in the moment and be persistent and keep on creating.
Amen to that, brother. And that brings us to the end of this week's Walsh Wednesday, the Reflective Series. I want to thank Nick Rivera and Brendan Lynch for spending their time and being vulnerable with us to tell their stories and to share as much of their wisdom as they have. For more information on Nick and Brendan, you can check out the links in the description. So in regard to Nick, you can follow him on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also see a link to the very first Walsh Wednesday episode that Nick was on several years ago. In regard to Brendan, you can check out Production House 45, Kenspiracy, Fredtown USA, and the Lip Sunc Battle that we did back in Gold's Gym, all in the description below. I want to send another thank you to the College of St. Rose and St. Rose Rocks for being a platform for fantastic artists, and check out the first episode of the latest limited run this Friday, November 20th. Thank you all so much for tuning in and enjoying all this. I hope that you get something out of this. I hope it inspires you, and I hope that you continue to bring good out into the world. As always, I'm Connor Walsh, and I'm glad we got to spend some time.